A messenger arrived from Dashrath. The delighted king, along with his courtiers and a large army, was on his way. The entourage would reach Mithila within a week. Dashrath wanted the wedding to take place as soon as possible. Could King Janak look for an auspicious date to prepare for the ceremony? My mother was relieved but also suddenly overwhelmed with preparations. It is an old belief in Mithila that a daughter's dowry shouldn't be amassed until the wedding is set. Such presumption may tempt fate. Though in general she scoffed at superstition, this one my mother had observed religiously. When I had asked her why, she said that she loved Urmila and myself too much to risk our happiness for the sake of her beliefs. Her embarrassed smile made me realize something I had not considered before. Even the strongest intellect may be weakened by love. This struck me as paradoxical. Shouldn't love make us more courageous, more determined to live according to our principles? I needed to study this strange emotion further. In my father's house, love flowed like a calm and aged river, nourishing but predictable. In Ayodhya, I would have new situations to examine. My mother's quarters buzzed with coming and going. Jewelers carrying caskets filled with ornaments to cover every inch of women's body. Weavers bent low under the weight of iridescent silk embroidered with gold thread. Perfumers preparing unguents of sandalwood and rose petals. The palace was awash with enthusiastic melody. The court musicians composing new tunes for the first and only royal wedding of this generation. Cooks rushed back and forth with delicacies for my father to approve. My cousins arrived, and the women's quarters filled with their excited bird calls. The days passed in a blur. Beauticians scrubbed us with turmeric and bathed us in milk. They perfumed our newly washed hair with incense smoke. They applied ash of pearl to our faces to keep our skin dewy and pristine. From a palace window, I watched messengers ride off through the shimmery green of the forests with invitations. But there were not as many as one would have expected for a fourfold royal wedding. I understood the reason. Too many kings had come to try for my hand, only to return to their homes in fury and shame, defeated by Shiva's bow. Obviously, they couldn't be invited to my wedding, nor could their allies. I felt a twinge of guilt. Because of me, my sister and cousins would be deprived of a ceremony as grand as they deserved. But in the end, it didn't matter. The retinue King Dashrath brought with him was large enough to fill the wedding hall. Additionally, holy men of every kind, from sleek Brahmins to mendicants with matted locks, arrived from all over Bharatvarsha to bless us. How had they even known? My father, delighted and unquestioning, constructed giant tents for their comfort and sent his best cooks to fashion their meals. Urmila told me the gossip. It was believed that among them, disguised, were gods and demigods come to observe the most important marriage of the century. No, of the entire Treta Yuga, ordained by Shiva himself. Can such things be true? She asked. And is our marriage that important? I had no answer for her. Ram and Lakshman had joined their father, who had been housed in a separate palace at the edge of the royal grounds because it was considered inauspicious for brides and grooms to meet in the days that preceded the wedding. I had to console myself with the fact that in a few days we would belong to each other. We would spend the rest of our lives together and we wouldn't allow any of society's foolish dictates to separate us. The night before the wedding, my mother summoned me to her chambers. I made my way to her through a maze of coffers filled with jewels and gold plate. She pushed aside a pile of shimmery silver cloth from a bench and beckoned me to sit by her. She wound her arms around me and hugged me to her bosom. A pang went through me as I realized what a big change this wedding would bring into both our lives. Would we ever see each other again? Perhaps she felt something similar, for her eyes were damp, and this was unusual in my pragmatic mother. Or was it some other fear that brought tears into her eyes? After a moment, she took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was practical and calm as always. Don't mind me. Mothers always get emotional at their daughters' weddings. When you have your own daughter, you will know. I laid my head on her shoulder. I told her that I would always remain close to her in my heart. Surely, there were ways of keeping in touch. Letter carriers, messenger birds. You are right, she said with a sigh. It is just that I have a foreboding that we will never meet again. But that is not the reason I called you here tonight. I need to tell you what I have learned about your new family. I wish it were more. But Ayodhya is far from us and I had only a little time. They are a complicated bunch, the members of the house of Raghu. Shouldn't we call the other girls to listen to? I asked. She shook her head, her forehead furrowed by a rare frown. I realized with a sinking of my heart that something significant troubled her. Urmila, as you know, is easily excitable, and your cousins, much as I love them, are worse. They would become unnecessarily anxious and might say the wrong thing in the presence of the wrong person. But you are level headed and know to keep your own counsel. And you are good at problem solving. I noticed how you immediately thought about your cousins when Ram told us of his pact with his brothers. I trust you will use what I am about to tell you in the best and wisest way. My stomach churned with nervousness. What was it about the court of King Dashrath that worried my mother so? I didn't share her confidence in my wisdom. I wanted to confess to her that I couldn't take credit for my quick thinking earlier. It was all the goddess. Who knew if she would ever speak through me again? But why worry my mother even more? Instead, I took a deep breath and nodded. As eldest, I knew it was my role to watch over the others, to shield them when I could. I was prepared to do it to the best of my ability and willingly too. Ram was not the only one who knew where his duties lay. Your dear father, my mother continued, is a saintly man. He was never interested in expanding his kingdom either through war or marriage alliances. Thus, I have the good fortune of being his only wife. He cherishes Urmila and you as much as he would have cherished sons. You don't know how rare this is in royal families. Sometimes I regret that I sheltered you so here in our peaceful little corner of the world because now you are going abroad with little armor to protect yourself from the intrigues that is common in palaces. She looked unhappy and uncertain. It hurt me because she had always been so confident. You have taught me to defend myself, I said. You have allowed me to learn to heal both plants and humans. You have inspired me to be kind and courageous, to not tolerate wrongdoing. I would rather live my life by these strategies than any other. My mother looked unconvinced. They are good qualities, but not, unfortunately, the ones society values most in a woman, nor the ones that will help you best when maneuvering around palace politics. But here is one thing I want you to remember. Maybe it will help you in a hard time. If you want to stand up against wrongdoing, if you want to bring about change, do it in a way that doesn't bruise a man's pride. You will have a better chance of success. Protests crowded my mouth. Was a man's pride more important than the truth? Why should I have to strategize if I was in the right? But, mother, I began, isn't it? My mother raised her hand to silence me. We only have a little time left together. I must use it to tell you about your in laws. King Dashrath is the opposite in many ways of your father. Early in his life, he decided that the boundaries of his kingdom, Koshal, must stretch farther than it ever had before. His ambition led him to fight many wars with kings and demons. He won most of them because he was a great warrior. He was impetuous and wild tempered and loved the excitement of combat. He had no qualms about throwing himself into the thick of battle. Twice he was so grievously wounded that people feared he would die. He was a great hunter as well, though he gave that up after he killed the son of a blind ascetic, mistaking him for a deer. They say the ascetic laid a terrible curse on him for that, but I couldn't discover the details. He is milder now and a most indulgent father, or indulgent, some would say, because his children were born in his old days after many holy yajnas. He dotes particularly on Ram, who is his favorite among all his sons. Dashrath certainly didn't make any efforts to hide his favoritism. Arriving in Mithila, he had hugged Ram for a long time, kissing his brow and murmuring endearments, while Lakshman got a few pats on the back. Bharat and Shatrughna stood back, deferential and ignored, not seeming to mind the attention heaped on their eldest brother. They were clearly as proud of Ram as Lakshman was. The brothers looked like they were at peace with Dashrath's treatment of them. I said, "Do you think it is something I need to worry about?" "Not yet," my mother said. "But things might change, especially when it is time for Dashrath to announce his heir. So keep your eyes open. Your immediate task will be a different one, but difficult in its own way because I can see how deeply you adore Ram. Your first job is to make sure Dashrath does not feel you are coming between him and Ram. As long as you are careful about that, Dashrath will like you. Not because of who you are, but because you are Ram's wife. Though I hope that will change as he gets to know you and to appreciate your qualities." I nodded. It was not the best of situations, but I could manage it. "A greater challenge," my mother said, "will be the women of the palace." "Women? Are there many?" "Yes, because Dashrath took numerous wives, if my sources are accurate. There is a great deal of rivalry among his queens and much vying for his attention. Though on the surface all is cordial, hidden animosities run deep. The three queens that concern you most are Kaushalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi. Kaushalya, the eldest, is Dashrath's chief consort, but not his favorite, even though she is Ram's mother. That has been a deep sorrow to her. She will try hard to make you her ally, to support her in her battle against the other queens. Listen patiently to her complaints about the other wives, but keep what she says to yourself. And as far as possible, be polite and respectful to them all and don't take sides. I nodded, absorbing all this. Sumitra, the exquisite, is the youngest of the three. For a time, Dashrath was infatuated with her beauty, as a result of which she grew disdainful of the other queens. But then she too was unable to give him the heir he wanted and fell from favor. How then did Dashrath get his sons? Finally, he had the holiest rishis in the land perform a very special prayer ceremony, as a result of which all the queens became pregnant. Something happened during that ceremony that indebted Sumitra to the other two queens. I couldn't discover the details, but afterwards she no longer gave them any trouble. Kaushalya gave birth to Ram. He is the firstborn. Kaikeyi to Bharat, and Sumitra had the twins Lakshman and Shatrughna. But she gave them to Kaushalya and Kaikeyi to bring up. I was startled by this information. I had never have guessed that the devoted Lakshman was only a half brother to Ram. Was there another deeper tie that bound him so tightly to his older brother? Could it have been forged in that ethereal world that I had glimpsed? What matters most to you in all of this, my mother continued, is that Lakshman worships his older brother. He wants, no, he needs to be close to him. He is probably worrying right now that marriage will affect the relationship, that you will take Ram away from him. I wouldn't do that, I cried hotly. I'm not that kind of person. But he does not know it. So you must make a special effort to welcome Lakshman into your heart and into your chambers and allow his relationship with his brother to continue unchanged. He will like you for it, as will Sumitra, and in Lakshman you will find a powerful protector. I will make sure Lakshman feels included, I said. But I couldn't resist adding, though I hope he will devote some portion of his attention to his new wife. Lakshman would require careful handling. From what I had seen, the two brothers were inseparable. That would have to change somewhat after marriage. Both Urmila and I needed it too. We would have to put our heads together and come up with a plan. As for protection, I believed that even I, inexperienced as I was, would be better at protecting myself from palace intrigues than the blunt and hot tempered Lakshman. And if by some strange chance I did require protection of another kind, didn't I have Ram? I have left Kaikeyi, the second wife of Dashrath, until the end, my mother said, because she is the most complicated. An accomplished and intrepid charioteer, she often drove Dashrath's chariot when he was at war. I didn't know women in Ayodhya were allowed to do such things, I exclaimed in admiration. Aren't they much stricter about rules and traditions there? My mother gave me a wan smile. She was less enthusiastic about Kaikeyi than I was. She is a healer too. Twice she saved the king's life when he was severely wounded. A healer? I said excitedly, glad to find someone in Ayodhya who share my interests. I pictured us becoming friends, spending long afternoons sharing plant lore. I could learn so much from her. But my mother shook her head in warning. Don't trust anyone in your new home too soon, least of all Kaikeyi. To continue with my story, having saved the king's life, Kaikeyi became Dasharath's favorite wife, his counselor and comfort, the most powerful person, male or female, in the palace. Be careful with her. I have heard that she is as changeable as clouds in a windy sky. If she takes a dislike to you, your life could become difficult. But perhaps I'm worrying unnecessarily. I have also heard that she has a deep fondness for Ram. I left my mother's chambers with my head whirling. How many people I would have to deal with in my new family to console or appease, comfort or avoid as the need arose. I would need to tread carefully between the quicksands of ancient antipathy. I would have to build my relationship with my husband cautiously without encroaching on my territory that his family felt belonged to them. Could I manage all that? I counted out the things I needed to do on my fingers. Respect Dasrath, be sympathetic to Kaushalya, be affectionate to Lakshman, observe Kaikeyi and learn from her how power could be used, all the while keeping a safe distance. But here is what was most fascinating: how much all these people, so different from each other, loved Ram. What enchantment did my betrothed possess that made even enemies forget their ancient rivalries in their desire to make him happy? I waited impatiently for an opportunity to discover it for myself. Thanks for listening. My mother's quarters buzzed with coming and going. Perfumers preparing unguents of sandalwood and rose petals. Unguents, unguents means a soothing or healing ointment. He won most of them because he was a great warrior. He was impetuous and wild tempered and loved the excitement of combat. Impetuous, impetuous means rash, reckless. He dotes particularly on Ram, who is his favorite among all his sons. Dot means to be extremely fond of. Kaushalya, the eldest, is Dasharath's chief consort. Consort means life partner. I was startled by this information. I had never have guessed that the devoted Lakshman was only a half brother to Ram. Was there another deeper tie that bound him so tightly to his older brother? Could it have been forged in that ethereal world that I had glimpsed? Ethergl, ethereal means extremely delicate. I have left Kaikeyi, the second wife of Dashrath, until the end, my mother said, because she is the most complicated. An accomplished and intrepid charioteer, she often drove Dashrath's chariot when he was at war. Intrepid. Intrepid means fearless, undaunted. Thanks for listening.